Hello, dear students, and welcome in the second presentation explaining the concept of peripheral rural areas and its main challenges and opportunities. More exactly, in this second presentation, we will identify how the peripheral rural areas can be developed in a sustainable way, and what are the main important barriers in order to reach sustainable development in the long run. I'm sure that until now, you have already learned something about the concept of sustainability. But what is sustainability? According to the United Nations definition, sustainable development means to fulfill the needs of the present without harming the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So basically, that means to assure our current needs without harming the environment or to deplete the non-renewable resources. You can learn more about what means sustainability by watching this suggested mandatory video that is also available on our online repository. In 2015, the United Nations established 17 development goals in order to reach sustainability. These are strategic action goals. You can find more about them in the video link suggested in our online repository. In these lectures and throughout the RURAP project, we'll target mostly 3 strategic development goals that are strategic development goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, number 15, life on land, and 13, that is about climate action. There are several challenges that must be addressed in the peripheral rural area for their sustainable development. Some of them became already important from the early 90s, like the economical viability of the farmers or social challenges. The others are or became important more recently, like, for instance, the lack of customer awareness and low research development initiatives targeting the peripheral rural areas. So the most important challenge for the sustainable development is about economic viability. You should know that nowadays, approximately 1/3 of all EU farmers are economically vulnerable. That means that such farms cannot cover their costs from direct sales. The vast majority are located in the peripheral rural areas. There are several reasons for their economical unsustainability, like lack of proper rewarding for their agricultural goods. Usually, there is no market for the non-marketable goods generated by the farming activity, like biodiversity or landscape. There is no proper differentiation for the products coming from such farms. And also, I must stress the fact that the hygiene standards are very strict and often not adapted to the realities of those regions, like lack of sanitary water or poor accessibility in terms of location. The second challenge is about how farmers from the peripheral areas have or have not access to different forms of public support. In the EU, such support is delivered throughout the Common Agricultural Policy. After 2014, with an extension until 2023, in the first pillar of CAP, aiming to support the farmer's income, there were developed different types of direct payments, like the basic payment scheme, the green payment, and so on, as you can see on this graph. In order to obtain such financial support, the farmers have to respect minimum environmental rules, establishing in what condition and in what quantities they can use inputs like fertilizers and pesticides not to harm water, air, or soil. And these minimal rules are known under the name of cross-compliance rules. Also, there were established some minimum pre-requirements to have access to such subsidies. And the most important ones are, for instance, about the minimum eligible area for a plot. And this should be bigger than 0.3 hectares. Also, the total value of the subsidies received by a farm should be bigger than 100 euro per farm per year. Such minimum thresholds affect mostly the farmers coming from the peripheral rural area that use small plots, and thus making them non-eligible for such a financial support. Concerning the environment and how environment is introduced into the common agricultural policy, here in this graph, you can see that there are different layers in the current policies. And these layers have to achieve something that is called cap greening. That means to better reward with subsidies the farmers that better protect the environment. The first layer that is compulsory for all farmers is about respecting the minimum requirements in terms of using inputs and protecting water, soil, and air. The second layer, which is also compulsory, means to reward farmers that agree to use certain farm management rules like product diversification or the creation of environmental focus areas represented by small patches of trees or ditches. Finally, the third layer is voluntary and can be accessed only if national governments set special programs in the second cap pillar, that is about rural development. And throughout these agri-environmental measures, national governments support farmers to manage their land in an environmental friendly way. Concerning the agri-environmental schemes, nowadays at the EU level, there are two possible approaches. The first one, that establish minimum farm management requirements, means that governments establish some such farm management requirements for farmers, and if they respect them, then they obtain additional payments. The second approach, that is called result-based, is more experimental, and it was mostly applied in Ireland. And that means that farmers have to prove that they deliver results. And usually these kind of results are countable, and they have to identify on their grasslands, for instance, some protecting plant species. In such an approach, the farmer has the freedom to choose the most appropriate farm management techniques in order to achieve good results. Here you can see some example for the agri-environmental schemes developed in Romania. Here in Romania, we use minimum farm management requirements in such agri-environmental schemes. In the map, you can see with different colors meadows and pastures that are important for the protection of different kind of species. And also with green, which is the vast majority, there are the high natural value meadows and pastures. In such an approach, for instance, on this kind of agri-environmental scheme devoted to high natural value meadows and pastures, the farmer has to respect the minimum farm management techniques underlined here with green. For instance, the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides is banned. Also, mowing can be start only after the 1st of July. And for animal grazing, summer grazing, the farmer can use a maximum 1 livestock unit per hectare in order not to harm the high natural value meadows and pastures. The second type of challenges in this area of the public support and regulation is represented by the unfair distribution of payments between farmers and regions. Those 80% of the direct payments from the first cap pillar arrive to less than 20% of the farms. Usually the biggest one, in terms of size, will get the most important budgetary share. Concerning the agri-environmental payments, access is difficult for the farmers coming from the peripheral areas due to bureaucracy and their lack of knowledge regarding the minimum farm management requirements. To that, you can add the difficult access to common land, mostly present in the mountain areas, and the lack of measures to better tackle the conflict between agriculture and wildlife. Here, we are talking mostly about big carnivores. The third challenge is represented by social challenges. And when we are discussing about social challenges, probably the most important challenge is population aging. As you can see in this map, the highest concentration of people over 65 years old can be observed in the mountain regions. And here we have a non-desired champion in the central Greece. Secondly, in terms of social challenges, we have to measure rural depopulation that affect more than 60% of the EU rural areas. To that, you can add low population densities, poor infrastructure, and low access to basic services like medical care, education, or culture that are so present in the peripheral areas. Here is an example from Greece that deals with rural depopulation. In red, there are the villages located in the peri-urban areas of the urban centers. Usually we are talking about departmental capital. In black, there are the villages with time distances more than 20 minutes from the village or a big village or a small city. As you can notice here in the graph, the villages located in a remote area bigger than 20 kilometers from an urban center are smaller in terms of rural population. Now, probably you are thinking why and in what way these social challenges influence biodiversity, for instance. Here in this graph, as pointed out by Jacob et al., there is the link between rural depopulation and biodiversity. At the beginning of rural depopulation process, the landscape became covered by a mosaic of habitats that support an increased biodiversity level. In time, most of the territory is covered by forests that become the dominant habitat due to the lack of proper management practices. Thus, on the long run, there is a net loss of biodiversity. To challenges from the social areas, we can add challenges from the consumption patterns that at the end will for sure affect farming practices engaged in the peripheral rural areas. As you might know, most of the customers now prefer Argentinian beef instead of consuming local breeds coming from high natural value pastures. This changes the number and type of animal flock used in the peripheral rural areas. Like, for instance, sheep is replacing traditional pig or cattle in Iberia. Sheep is replacing cattle in Romania, and so on. These drastic changes in the grazing practices that previously supported rich biodiversity or protected plant and animal wild species. As a challenge, we can measure the lack of public awareness concerning the peripheral rural areas' farmland benefits. These areas produce not only goods like milk, meat, and so on, but also services that can be rewarded by a correct price on the market. They also produce non-marketable goods that do not have a market because they are not executable and non-rival. A good is non-rival if the consumption of one person does not reduce the amount available to others. A non-marketable good, as non-marketable goods, you can see as examples the clean air, water and soil, biodiversity, in terms of number of plant and animals per measurement units, and so on. Other example of non-marketable goods can be seen in this slide, like agricultural landscape, water quality and availability, soil functionability, climate stability, air quality, or resilience to flooding or fire. To that, you can add some social public goods represented by food security, rural vitality, farm and animal welfare and health, and also second-order public benefits like tourism and recreation sites, employment opportunities resulting from public goods, social and cultural benefits, and most important are traditions. Other important challenge for the peripheral rural area is represented by the lack of training and advisory support. Based on previous research, like the High Natural Value Link project, but also the study developed under the RURAP project, we can say that employers from the peripheral rural area ask for graduates that can master an in-depth understanding of interaction between land use, environment, and economic specific topics, but targeting the peripheral rural areas. Practitioners highlighted as most important skills for a future employee to be self-direction, cooperation, negotiation, practical knowledge, or project management. Skills like organization, cooperation, negotiation, teaching, or multiculturality are mostly missing from our European higher university curriculum. All the drivers presented in the previous slides pushed for land intensification or abandonment. And these two phenomena drastically affected the environmental values of the peripheral rural areas. As you can see in this graph, modified after Hugoven et al., the most important challenge is to transform the high natural value farming systems in sustainable ones. It is a path that can deliver the conservation of species-rich agricultural habitats and landscapes. But intensification affected nowadays important parts of the high natural value territory, as you can see in this map with dark red, in all parts of Europe. If you want, you can learn more about intensification negative effects using the link provided in our online repository. Abandonment also can be understood better if you go on this link and you will watch this movie explaining the main negative effects of land abandonment in peripheral areas. This recording will end here. I hope you enjoy it. When you finish reviewing it several times and you consider that you are ready to learn about the opportunities for the development of peripheral rural areas, please go to the next presentation. If you have any question, please use the email from the beginning of the PowerPoint. I hope you enjoy it and see you in the next presentation.